computer. Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this morning. I am going to be presenting the top 10 tips, in my personal opinion, the top 10 tips for writing your CV, and we'll be going through what that looks like. So today's presentation will include those 10 tips. Also, 5 additional tips for anybody that's an international educator, and that means a teacher, a counselor, an administrator. And also, I will share the timeline for international applications because we are right in the recruitment season right now for international teachers. Please feel free to type in the chat function at any point during the presentation, and I'll save your questions for the end. I will make sure that we have enough time at the Q&A at the end. So at this point, you might be wondering, who am I and what do I know about this? So I am a fellow TCNJ alumni, and I graduated from Mallorca in 2016 with my my Master in Education Leadership and TCNJ or New Jersey Principalship. I've been overseas, including right now from Central Mexico, for the last over 20 years. And I've been in teaching roles and school leadership roles in 6 different countries. Right now, since April 2022, I've been self-employed as an international teacher consultant, working directly with teachers and administrators, helping them find their next position, and living here in Central Mexico, where it's a cool 15 degrees. So this is the snapshot. And so if you wanted to take a photo or something, these are the top 10 tips for writing your CV. And I'll be going through each one in more detail. And so I won't bother reading this list, but anything that you see as blue is a hyperlink to my website where I've written an article or a tip on that particular topic. Because I think that international education is the best kept secret in education. I want more people to head overseas before they decide, for example, to quit teaching altogether. And so I give this information completely free. I want people to go international. And if they happen to want to hire me, great. But if not, I just want them to share this information. So on your CV, at the top of your resume, you're going to put your current city, your email address, and your cell phone or cell phone numbers, depending on if you have an eSIM card or multiple numbers. You want to make sure your contact information is up to date. This is an optional possibility at the top of your resume as well as your website. So I've seen a lot of my teacher candidates and my clients, they have a professional website or a Google site or an e-portfolio. And oftentimes this will include a teaching philosophy or photos of the classroom or projects that they've done. This is a great place to scan and promote your PD certificates. You know, when we get this lovely certificate of participation, what do? We can put it in our e-portfolio. You can put photos and details of your field trips, special events, any coaching you've done, co-curricular activities, and just make sure that this is up to date. We don't want something that is, you know, from 2016 or 2017. Just keep it up to date if you're going to use it as part of your candidacy profile. So talking about LinkedIn, I'm a big proponent or a cheerleader for LinkedIn, especially actually since I've got into consulting. But even beforehand, I was trying to grow my professional network by adding people. When we go to these PD and workshops, you know, get people's names and add them on your LinkedIn. It's not super personal. It's actually where you can grow your professional network. And then you can put the little bubble around your photo saying you're open to work when you're actually recruiting. You may want to talk to your supervisors if they're part of your LinkedIn network before you do that. And then the advantages of LinkedIn is that you learn about new positions. Sometimes when you follow schools or you follow big groups, you can see the positions being listed as they're coming up. You can research schools on LinkedIn. And of course, you can build your own portfolio or professional portfolio on LinkedIn by sharing and reading professional articles and learning about the latest trends in education. And once again, you want to make sure this is updated. So after you get into that, out of the contact info, you're going to get into your CV headings. So these are your CV titles. And I would say these are the obligatory in this order. Education at the top, then your experience. You may divide that into leadership or teaching experience, if that's the case for you. You want to include your professional development, your co-curricular activities, your interests. And so I'm going to go into each of these in just a little second. Some optional CV headings would be if you're just starting out in your teaching career, maybe you have your student volunteer teaching experience. You may also want to highlight some additional skills, certifications, and memberships, professional memberships. Some people also have publications. So if they're a published author or journal articles, and some educational technology skills, if that makes sense for you as a candidate. So why is your education at the top? Very often schools need to know this for your work visa. So don't hide it. Don't make them go looking for it. Put it right at the top. Teaching certification, including your renewal date. Many teaching certifications have a date where you need to do certain PD by the time in order to renew, and some are permanent. And that I would very blatantly write that out if it is a permanent certification. A lot of Canadian certification, for example, is permanent. And then you want to write your university degrees with the most recent first at the top. So that's your education. And then we get into your work experience. And so in your CV bullet points, so after you've described or you've written out who you are, what position and school and dates, then you're going to describe some of your experience in each school. You're going to want to use STAR. And I can happily say this is not my idea. I took this from a global recruiting director from ISS, Dr. Pauline. So this S stands for situation. So the grade level, the curriculum, the T. So then after the situation, TAR is not going to happen for every job, but you're going to pick and choose. You may choose that you're going to talk about the task that was set out, why you were hired. Or you might talk about the A, the action, the unique skills and abilities you brought to the job, or the steps that you had, that you took to meet the goals, maybe the task. And then in some cases, you might be able to talk to R, the results. So the concrete results regarding student learning and what lessons or skills that you learned during that particular job. So the S, in every single case, you want to talk about your situation. So grade levels, subjects, and curriculum and standards, but then TAR depending on each job. And don't forget that your CV bullet points the quantity should reflect the length of job you were in that position, and also the most recent will have more bullet points. So by the time you get down to 10 or 15 years experience, you're not going to be having 3 or 4 bullet points. You might just have 1 or 2. So your professional development category that you have on your CV, if you have had the fortune to present as well as be a participant, I would highly recommend separating those out. In fact, you might even do like a 2-column invisible table where you do presenter and what the name of the workshops and where, what conferences, and then participant. If you haven't yet had that option or that, then you will just strictly not mention participant and just go straight into recent PD, relevant PD to the position you're applying. So you may be changing your PD depending on the job you're applying for. And then you want to specify if it's a workshop, training, conference, and then if any certification that you got during that PD. So your co-curricular activities, sometimes called extracurricular activities, you want to highlight any coaching you've done in the past, any club or activity facilitation. And especially you want to highlight anything that might be diverse from your subject area. Let's say you're a physics teacher and you were facilitating role-playing games. Hi, Adam. Or you were the early years games and after school activity or something like that. So if you have a different division or a different subject area, I would especially highlight that because it shows some diversity. And a lot of clients are surprised when I put this on the CV, but your interests are so important to a school community, especially when we're talking about international school communities, because you are going to be part of that family. You're going to be I'm not thinking assimilating, but that's the wrong word. But you're going to be integrating. That's the word. You're going to be integrating into a school community. And so I highly recommend putting your interests up to date, of course. So for example, when I played softball in my 20s, I would not put that in my 50s. But I do say that I like hiking, I like walking, because these are things I still do every day. And speaking of which, I would put them in this particular order, putting active first, creative second, and passive or sort of sedentary activities for third. And the reason we do this is we want to highlight the fact that we are active in body and mind and healthy, and we won't be taking too many sick days or anything like that. We want to kind of think about the HR and the head of school that's reading our CV, and they're going to see, wow, okay, this is a marathon runner. I remember actually having a math teacher client, and he was a marathon runner. I thought, whoa, we want to put that first because that is a very healthy person, and then go into creative, because if we're, for example, not super creative in our subject area, but we play the guitar, we sing in a choir, or we like to do painting on the weekends, this shows some diversity in our candidacy. And then passive, I would be very specific, like knitting, gardening. Well, gardening is not necessarily passive, but knitting, crocheting, or reading, but specifically like reading historical biographies or reading science fiction, something that can open the door on new questions in your interview. And the interests also have an advantage of perhaps the head of school reading your CV has the same interests, and now that can open up some new line of question. So then we have your references. So after we've gone through the different categories, and you may be adding some of those optional categories, at the very bottom, you will have your references. And I always recommend to actually fit them in on the second page of your CV, because when you put references upon request, then you're putting the onus on them to contact you. Whereas if you have your references ready to go on your CV, this is always more recommended. So I would recommend 3 to 4. And how to choose them is the hierarchy. So the position, head of school, general director, CEO, if that's what your school is called, always carries a little bit more weight than a principal, who carries a little bit more weight than an assistant principal, who carries more weight than a department head. And though your department head might be the person that supervised you and knows you the best, I would still recommend that you put your head of school and invite them into your classroom when you're recruiting so that they can speak to your teaching. I would also put recent first, and then slowly you would go back a few years. You wouldn't necessarily go back more than 10 years in a reference unless, generally speaking, I would just keep it very recent. And then if anyone has moved on, because as we know, the international circuit is quite mobile, then I would just simply say they were your former elementary principal, and then now at, and I would italicize now at, and the name of the new school, so that you're always keeping your references up to date, but they're still your references, even though they've moved on from the school that you used to teach at together. And then this is a way to kind of summarize that information with the title. The reason why we might use Ms., Mr. is because names for HR, if HR are not a native English speaker, they might not know the names, or the names are not necessarily easy to tell what their gender is. Then I would just help them out with Ms. and Mr. School name and location, email, and phone number. So that was very quickly a rundown of the top 10 tips for writing your CV. As I said before, these are hyperlinks that if you would like this presentation in the chat, there is a sign-in sheet. And for anyone that came in a little bit later, I'm just going to put that sign-in sheet there. So if you want this PDF emailed to you, you can send that to, you can sign up for that. So then I did promise at the beginning of this presentation 5 additional tips. So the 5 additional tips for international educators, and it's almost always related to your work visa, is that you will mention your current city and you will mention your hometown. So these might be 2 very different cities. Current city, for example, I'm in Querétaro, Mexico, but I'm from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. So I'm going to put those 2, and your hometown will get transferred into your contract, which will then be the place that you fly to and from. And so the importance of putting your hometown so that the school knows from where you will be flying each time. That's the importance of putting those 2 locations. Your date of birth might be contentious and very personal, but this is again for your work visa to be able to ensure that you will be able to work in that country. Some countries have age restrictions, unfortunately, with 50, 55, 60, 65, and some don't. So that's the good news, is that we can also still work until our 70s. And I have actually had clients in their late 60s being placed even this year. So the date of birth is just so that we put all our cards on the table. In that same respect, the nationality might also pose as a problem or a barrier for getting a work visa. And it might be a conversation that you need to have if your school has some restrictions on nationality. The marital status and dependents, again, very personal, but they need to know if they're going to be providing a bigger house, or providing more bedrooms, or providing a trailing spouse visa. If you're a teacher partner, you're at, some people will say, the top of the echelon, because now you get to come in with 2 teachers' contracts. And so you want to clearly declare that on your CV. Any dependents that are school-aged, and if they're not school-aged, you might still just mention that you have 2 children in university. So they know that they might be coming in and visiting. They might give you a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom house at that point. And then the photo is a hyperlink to a tip that I've talked about, how to take a good CV photo. And the reason a CV photo at this point is the international standard so far still is because we are hiring from a distance. You know, we're trying to get hired not with dropping off of your CV at the school. So the photo just helps place the person. And for me as a consultant, I don't want any surprises. I don't want any of my clients to have the situation where they come into a Zoom interview, and then I've actually heard horror stories of the school disconnecting when they see the person. So I want full disclosure on the CV. And I think in this day and age with diversity and equity and inclusion, we want to put that out there so that the schools know who they're possibly hiring. And then finally, this is the timeline for finding an international teaching position. So as I mentioned, right now we're in the crux of the recruiting season. The beginning of the recruiting season has started. So if you are looking at moving in the summer of 2024, Right now is the time to update your documents, so your CV, your cover letter. And then if you care to have some assistance and my help, you can schedule me for a video call, and I also help recreate your CV and your cover letter in the international standard that I've mentioned earlier. And then I help you with some research, pointing you in the right direction for where to look for a job. And I encourage you to also network your leads, network for your job leads that are out there with LinkedIn and even Facebook. I got my last position thanks to Facebook. So, and then finally start applying and getting those interviews. So at this point, I'm going to thank you very much for joining me today, and I'm going to take a look in the chat for some questions. But just to let you know that if any of this information seemed quite fast or rapid, feel free, please, to head over to my website, jpmintconsulting.com, and you will see a blog menu, and you will see a job search tip of the week menu. And so there's lots of information there on various things to do with recruiting and heading overseas. At this point, I'm going to stop the recording. Let's see how I do that.